This video is brought to you by my Patreons, Otimotiosum, Matt Zweig, Daniel H. McGillivray, Marlo Brown, and Valerie Hyde. All my patrons, thanks 1,000 times, thanks 1,000,000 times. Hello everyone, welcome back. I am Fer, and today I have some predictions about what's going to happen in the story of Magic the Gathering in the sets of 2022. And it will be fun coming back in a year and seeing all these predictions and see what things I got right, or most likely what things I got wrong. Ever since Vorinclex appeared in Kaldheim, it has been very clear that the Phyrexians are the returning bad guys to the Magic the Gathering story. Which I find really cool, because as you can tell from my channel, I find the Phyrexians, their culture, their language, their history, everything about them to be really interesting. And so I fully expected Wizards of the Coast to announce a set related to Mirrodin or to Phyrexians, but no. I mean, if we look at the sets that were announced for 2022, the only one that involves Phyrexians in any way is the Brothers' War. And we know this because this is actually a flashback set. It tells the events from far into the past of the Magic story. And so we know that the Phyrexians were the ones who corrupted Ursa's brother Mishra, and that this started the enmity between Ursa and Jacmot that would lead to the events of the Weatherlight Saga, blah 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 blah. But in fact, I think that in all of these sets, we are going to see Phyrexians, and that we are going to see them doing things that are relevant for the present of the Magic story. Yeah, even in the flashback set. So let's go set by set in order, starting with Kamigawa, Neon Dynasty. Many people think that Neon Dynasty is going to happen in the future of the Magic story, which would make sense because this is a very futuristic setting, but it actually happens near the present point. We know that because the original Kamigawa block was actually a flashback set. So it happened 2,000 years into the past of the present point of the Magic story. And we know that Neon Dynasties happens 2,000 years after the original Kamigawa, which sets it pretty much at the present point. Perhaps a little before or a little after the events in Strixhaven. Which means that New Kamigawa is going to be a lot like Kaladesh, because Kaladesh had a lot of sci-fi, futuristic feeling, but it managed to blend it really well with the Magic the Gathering flavor that we know and love. But anyway, let's talk about the Phyrexians. I think that in the same way that Vorinclex was in Kaldheim looking for something, in Kamigawa we will see Jin-Gitaxias looking for something else. And this makes a lot of sense thematically, because the Phyrexians are all about the artificial replacing the organic in order to make it perfect. But New Kamigawa is obviously inspired by the cyberpunk movement, and this movement is all about cyborgs. It's all about the artificial and the organic mixing together, working together as one. So these are like these two different approaches to technology and progress. One works with nature, cyberpunk, and the other replaces nature, which are the Phyrexians. Which is really cool. We can see that actually in the concept art for Kamigawa, in this huge tree growing out of the middle of the city. This also means that in the same way that medieval Japan was the inspiration for the original Kamigawa, modern day Japan is the inspiration for modern day Kamigawa. Because Japan as a nation has been very successful at combining their traditional elements with their highly advanced technological society. To this day, it's very common in Japan to see people going to Shintoist temples to worship nature spirits. And so it's just thematically everything works really well together. It also makes a lot of sense that Jin-Gitaxias is looking for something in this plane specifically, because if the people in this plane manage to combine nature with technology, then they probably achieved something that Jin-Gitaxias has not been able to achieve, because in all his experiments, he's always trying to replace nature. Probably what Jin-Gitaxias is looking for is going to be related to cyborgs somehow. And so, yeah, you probably can expect cyborg to be a new creature type in the new Kamigawa set. And I predict that Jin-Gitaxias is going to get whatever he's looking for, and then he's going to use the planar bridge to go away before anyone can stop him. Then we have the streets of New Capenna. At first glance, this may look like it has nothing to do with Phyrexians at all. Yeah, I mean, it is a very cool concept to have this sky city with this Art Deco style, ruled by these demon crime families. But then there is one mention in the Wizards of the Coast website that pretty much confirms that Phyrexians are going to be involved in this set. Because this set is very important for Elspeth. Now, you might know Elspeth as that planeswalker who fought all those gods in Theros. And yeah, she is, but also her story actually begins in original Phyrexia, because her plane, actually we don't know where she was from, but whatever plane Elspeth is from, it was conquered by the Phyrexians. And so Elspeth and pretty much all her family, all her community, were sent to pretty much concentration camps, where they were tortured and they suffered immensely. She was just waiting for the day that it would be her turn to be used for these inhuman experiments the Phyrexians were doing. Until one day all of this suffering made her spark ignite and Elspeth was able to escape to somewhere else. And then she spent some time traveling the multiverse until she arrived in Band, and then a bunch of stuff happens. Elspeth has a very long story, which I'm trying to make short, but the point is that she spent all of this time going to many different places, and I think that at some point she arrived at Capenna. But interestingly enough, Capenna is just the name of the city. This is not the name of the plane. And so I think that this is actually Serra's realm. Serra's realm was an artificial plane, much like original Phyrexia or new Phyrexia. It was created by none other than Serra. She was a white planeswalker who wanted to create a place where there would be no suffering. And so she created this artificial plane and she filled it with angels. And for a time, it was good. Until the Phyrexians attacked and they corrupted the plane. Ursa tried to help Serra, but in the end she had to run away. And here we learn something really interesting about artificial planes. Apparently, they are actually very unstable, and they need the constant power of a planeswalker or some other very powerful being in order to continue existing. The last we saw of Serra's realm, it had collapsed and all of its energy was actually used by the Weatherlight. Long story. But I think we will find out that Serra's realm was actually not destroyed entirely, that some of it survived and that these demons took control of the plane, creating New Capenna. But this has also very interesting implications for the Phyrexians in New Phyrexia, because New Phyrexia was originally Mirrodin, yet another artificial plane, this time created by the robot planeswalker Karn, a robot planeswalker. He's one of my favorite characters. Anyway, the point is that since Karn had to run away from New Phyrexia, just like Serra's realm, without its planeswalker creator, this plane should now be very unstable. And so I think that's why Phyrexians are going to other planes. They are looking for a way to make their plane stable again. They could fix that with a planeswalker, but Phyrexians cannot be planeswalkers because they are not organic, so they cannot have a spark. Also, they could try to fix it trying to create a god, much like gods exist in Kaldheim or Theros, so maybe they are trying to create a new Phyrexian god. But I find it more cool the idea that they are trying to create a new Phyrexian planeswalker, which has never existed before. You see, in the Magic the Gathering lore, sparks are these things that some living creatures have, and they can be ignited by powerful emotions, and when they ignite, they give its user the ability to travel between the different planes of the multiverse. Now, the thing is that sparks need to have an organic origin. I mean, of course, sure, Karn has one and he's a robot, but actually Karn has the spark of Ursa, his creator. And so, as far as we know, sparks can only have an organic origin. And so I think that Phyrexians are going to try to kidnap some being from somewhere in the multiverse, ignite its spark, or maybe capture a planeswalker whose spark is already ignited. That would be easier, come to think of it. And then they are going to try to use this technology, perhaps the cyborg technology they got from Kamigawa, in order to turn this being into a Phyrexian, a being loyal to Phyrexia. And then this new planeswalker will be able to keep New Phyrexia stable. And so, yeah, that's what they are going to try to do, and I suspect they are going to succeed, because having a Phyrexian Planeswalker card would be really cool, but that card cannot exist if a character doesn't become a Phyrexian Planeswalker. But anyway, going back to New Capenna, I think we will see here Elspeth, and she is also there looking for something, because we know that Elspeth hates the Phyrexians with a passion. If she heard that Jin-Gitaxias was seen in Kamigawa and the Vorinclex was seen in Kaldheim, she knows they are up to something, and so perhaps she goes to Capenna to try to find out what's going on, and maybe we could see Elspeth dressed with these 1930s clothing, you know what I mean, and then we could have all this art noir story about detectives or something, and we can see maybe Elspeth working with a demon detective. I don't know, it has a lot of potential, but also I think that in this plane we could see Elesh Norn. That Elesh Norn went to New Capenna because she is also looking for something in this plane, something maybe that Sarah left behind, and maybe that's also what Elspeth is looking for. Maybe if Sarah left something very powerful behind, it could give Elspeth the power to finally defeat the ancient enemies, which caused her so much suffering during her life. And in fact, I predict that there's going to be at some point a fight between Elesh Norn and Elspeth. And that would be really cool, because both of these characters are centered in white mana, but they represent very different aspects from white mana. Because of course, like, Elspeth is a warrior from the weak, and she's all about compassion and clemency. But Elesh Norn is all about order, it's all about obedience, it's all about rules, it's all about loyalty, blind loyalty even. And so seeing both of them fight is going to be really interesting. And I predict that Elspeth is going to lose, because of course the Phyrexians need to succeed, they need to create this Phyrexian Planeswalker. But of course Elspeth is not going to be entirely defeated, and she's going to be looking for a rematch. The next one is Dominaria United. And this one is really difficult, because anything could happen in Dominaria. Literally, it feels like everything has happened in Dominaria at some point. It could even be that this Dominaria United has no storyline and is just a recap of many things that have happened in the story of Dominaria, some of which do include the Phyrexians. But if there's an original new story, a new storyline for Dominaria United, I think it would involve Urabrask and Sheoldred, or at least Urabrask alone, because at some point we know that there was a sort of mini civil war in New Phyrexia of Vorinclex, Elesh Norn, and Jin-Gitaxias against Sheoldred and Urabrask, and we know that Urabrask and Sheoldred were defeated and they had to run away. Maybe they could still be hiding in New Phyrexia somewhere, but maybe they managed to escape to Dominaria, and this would be a case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Maybe they are willing to offer information or means, or even to fight against the other predators in revenge. And it would be really interesting to see characters like Karn and Elspeth, who were really hurt by the Phyrexians, trying to work with these Phyrexians, which are temporary allies, because as soon as they defeat the other two predators, Sheoldred and Urabrask are going to be back to being enemies of them. So that would be really, really interesting. And finally, we have the Brothers' War. This is actually one of the first stories of the Magic the Gathering lore, and it tells the story of how two brothers, Ursa and Mishra, fought a bloody civil war against each other for control of Dominaria. Eventually, in his quest for power, Mishra came in contact with the Phyrexians, and then the Phyrexians corrupted him, and they used him as a tool to fight against his brother, which he was already doing anyway. If you want to know more, there are a ton of videos in YouTube that tell everything that happens in the Brothers' War, but here are my predictions. First, about the cards. I think that we are going to get a new Ursa card that is not going to be mono blue. We are going to get a new Jagmoth card, in which Jagmoth is not going to be a human, because we know that at some point he became this horrible Lovecraftian abomination of a god. And I think we're going to get a card that represents Jagmoth as a god, and that's going to be really cool. I think that we are going to get a new Mishra card, which is actually going to be useful in Commander. Because right now, the card that we have of Mishra is completely useless in Commander, because it's all about bringing cards from your sideboard, but there are no sideboards in Commander. But these are my predictions about how this set can impact the present of the Magic the Gathering story. And that's with just a little bit of retconning. First, I predict that Ursa is going to be retconned to not be as much into eugenics as he is in the novels. Because in the novels, Ursa just loves eugenics. And so they are going to change that, and when they do, I'm pretty sure that Spice 8-Rack is going to make like an 8-hour video of how this change relates somehow with early French anarchist communes or something, and I'm going to watch all of it. But I think that we are also going to see Jagmoth planning for the eventuality of his death. And that's going to be really interesting, because I don't know what plan Jagmoth had, but I'm pretty sure that that plan was going to be incomplete, and that maybe that's part of what the Praetors are doing. Maybe they know about Jagmoth's plan somehow, and they are trying to bring it to fruition. Maybe it's a plan to resurrect Jagmoth, although I doubt that. Most likely it is related with a new Phyrexian Planeswalker, or it could be something else entirely. And this is really cool, because this little moment is not going to change or affect anything that we know that happened afterwards, so it doesn't contradict anything that we know, but his plan is going to be very relevant for the present of the Magic story. And I think if they do that, I think it would be a very good way to use retconning, because sometimes retconning is infamous, because often when it's used pretty bad, but I think this would be a good way of using retconning, and also to make Ursa less into eugenics, because I want to like him as a character, but right now it's really hard, you know? So anyway, those are my predictions for what's going to happen with the Magic story in 2022. And so let's recap. It's going to be Jin-Gitaxias in Kamigawa, also Cyborg is a new creature type. We are going to see Elspeth in New Capenna. Also, New Capenna is Serra's Realm. Also, we are going to see Elspeth with a trench coat, and that's going to be really sexy. We are also going to see Elish Norn in Capenna. Elish Norn and Elspeth are going to fight. Then we are going to see Urabraz and Sheldred in Dominaria, and now they are trying to work with the good guys. And finally, we're going to find out that Ursa is not into eugenics, and that Jagmoth had a plan that is still ongoing. So yeah, those are my predictions for the Magic the Gathering story, and so let's come back in a year and see how many of those I got right.